GPS navigation satellite launches on SpaceX rocket. Watch our live coverage of the countdown and launch of a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket at 7:24 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 12:24 GMT, on January 18 from Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, Florida. With the GPS 3SV06 navigation satellite, U.S. Space Force. Follow us on Twitter. SpaceX's second launch for the U.S. military in 3 days is set to blast off from Florida and deliver a GPS navigation satellite into orbit Wednesday. Reinforcing the global positioning and timing network as 4 more GPS spacecraft are in storage at a Lockheed Martin factory in Colorado to be launched as needed over the next few years. The launch of the U.S. Space Force's GPS 3SV06 mission, the 6th spacecraft in the latest generation of GPS 3 series satellites, is set for 7:10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 12:10 GMT, Wednesday from Pad 40 at Cape C. A SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket will give the satellite a ride into orbit. The Falcon 9 has a 15-minute launch window Wednesday. The launch of the new GPS satellite Wednesday comes less than 3 days after a SpaceX Falcon Heavy rocket blasted off from Kennedy Space Center carrying 2 military satellites into geosynchronous zone. Forecasters predict a greater than 90% chance of favorable weather Wednesday morning for liftoff of the Falcon 9 from Cape Canaveral. But officials will watch wind and sea conditions downrange in the booster recovery area. There is a moderate to high risk those conditions won't be favorable for landing of the first stage, which could prompt SpaceX to delay the launch. Once it lifts off, the 229-foot-tall, 70-meter Falcon 9 rocket will head northeast from Cape Canaveral to place the GPS 3SV06 satellite at the proper altitude and inclination to reach a final operating position in the GPS constellation. Following a standard launch profile, the Falcon 9 will fire its 9 kerosene-fueled first-stage engines for about 2.5 minutes. The booster will shut down and drop away from the Falcon 9's upper stage, which will continue into orbit with the GPS satellite, first placing the payload into a parking orbit about 8 minutes after liftoff. At around the same time, the Falcon 9's first-stage booster, designed B1077, will drop out of the sky and slow for landing on a SpaceX drone ship positioned a few hundred miles east of Charleston, South Carolina. The drone ship will bring the booster, set to make its second trip to space, back to Cape Canaveral for refurbishment and reuse on a future mission. The payload fairing on top of the Falcon 9 will jettison a few moments after ignition of the upper stage engine for its first burn. SpaceX has dispatched a recovery ship into the Atlantic to also retrieve the 2 halves of the nose cone for reuse, after the aeroshells parachute into the sea. About 63 minutes into the mission, the Falcon 9's upper stage will reignite for about 44 seconds. The powerful engine, generating more than 200,000 pounds of thrust, will propel the GPS 3SV06 spacecraft into an elongated orbit stretching to an altitude of some 12,550 miles, 20,200 kilometers, at its highest point. After flying into communications range of Space Force ground stations in Hawaii and California, the rocket will deploy the GPS satellite at about 1 hour and 29 minutes after liftoff. Over the next 1 to 2 weeks, the satellite will use its own orbit-raising engine to maneuver into a circular medium Earth orbit 12,550 miles above Earth at an inclination of 55 degrees. If all goes according to plan, the new satellite, nicknamed Amelia Earhart, after the aviation pioneer, will be transitioned to the control of Space Force operators. The GPS 3SV06 spacecraft is the 6th in a line of GPS 3 series satellites built by Lockheed Martin. In its launch configuration fully fueled with propellant, Senior Materiel Leader for the GPS Space Vehicles Acquisition Delta at Space Systems Command,